Chapter 2381. Who are you referring to as shameless? How can you blame me for that? Alright, we'll blame that on me. Waylon rubbed the corner of her eyes. His thumb then slipped down to her chin, pinched it, and lifted her face. I shouldn't have left you, an idiot in the kitchen, alone at home. For safety's sake, I should hire a housekeeper and get them to come here when I'm not at home. She would come here to take care of you, lest you get yourself killed someday in the future. At that moment, a rumble from her stomach responded to the suggestion. Waylon chuckled. Are you hungry? Cameron responded with a hum. Waylon did not want her to stay hungry while she waited for him to clean up the mess. The kitchen won't be ready to use for a while, so let's order takeout. After ordering takeout, Cameron sat at the table and gobbled the food. Although the takeout did not taste as good as Waylon's cooking, it did not taste too bad. It took Waylon an hour and a half to clean up the kitchen. He then walked to the balcony and called someone to arrange for a housekeeper to come to the Emperor tomorrow. As soon as the call ended, he received a call from Leonardo. He frowned and picked up the call. What's the matter? Leonardo reported embarrassedly, Mr. Goldman, Miss Holland has been waiting for you downstairs for a long time. Do you want to? I'm not going back to the company today, so tell her not to wait for me. Before Leonardo could say anything, Waylon had already ended the call. On the other end of the call, Leonardo came to Minzy's side, and Minzy asked with a smile, how did it go? Leonardo replied apologetically, Mr. Goldman said that he won't be coming into the office today, so he asks you not to wait for him. Is that so? Upon hearing his reply, Minzy's smile gradually faded as she clenched her hands tightly. However, her emotions did not surface. Then do you know who he is with at this moment? Since Leonardo had gotten into contact with Giselle and Jesse, he could now see through what a woman was thinking at first glance. It's obvious that this woman is appearing here at the company time after time, because of Mr. Goldman. The two sons of this family really have a way with women. Damn, if they could just give me a teeny tip of the charm that they possess, I wouldn't have been single all this while. Leonardo smiled. I'm sorry, but this is Mr. Goldman's private matter, so I'm in no position to intervene. Minzy nodded. Thank you. She then picked up her handbag, turned around, and left. Meanwhile, at Emperon, Cameron had just finished eating when she realized that the kitchen had been cleaned up and was spotless, as if it was brand new, and she felt a little ashamed. After cleaning up the table, she walked upstairs and stopped outside Waylon's room as she decided to apologize to him first. Let's just take what I said earlier as a result of me starving. She raised her hand and was about to knock on the door when it opened. Waylon had just finished taking a shower. The Prussian blue silk nightgown fitted him perfectly, and the belt was loosely tied around his waist. The wet ends of his hair were still drenched as he walked out of the vapor and steam that dispersed into the room from the bathroom, accompanied by a faint mint and violet fragrance. Cameron was astonished for a few seconds, and the words of apology that she had originally come up with all fell into the back of her mind. He propped his arm against the door. Are you looking for me? Cameron crossed her arms, shifted her gaze away from him, and asked in a casual manner, aren't you going to the company? She wanted to bite off her tongue. That's not what I came here to say. A hint of despicable charm escaped through the corners of Waylon's eyes. It's already evening. What else could I do even if I were to go to the company now? I'm just asking. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. But that was when an arm pulled her backward. Cameron's palm was pressed against his chest. She felt his warm, beating pulse, and her heart could not stop racing. You haven't taken a shower? Waylon stopped near her face, his face only less than an inch away from her lips. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and her legs shivered from the nervousness. Why must I take a shower? Chapter 2382. Waylon's gaze was fixed on the face that looked like that of a dirty cat that had just run out of a coal mine and had rubbed its face in ashes, without knowing it. Cameron's cheeks warmed up upon seeing that he was staring at her. Why are you looking at me? Waylon could not help but laugh out loud. You're the dignified heir of the Southerns, so why would you look like a dirty cat? The original intimate atmosphere was completely interrupted by Waylon's words, and Cameron pushed him away immediately. Who are you referring to as a cat? He held her in his arms. Are you doubting me? Cameron bit his shoulder, but did not exert too much force. With that, it opened a chance for Waylon to pinch her cheek and kiss her on the lips. Cameron was stunned because of the ambush and was picked up horizontally before she could react. Cameron struggled in his arms. Wayne, let me down. Waylon carried her into the bathroom, and Cameron instantly saw her face in the mirror and covered it with her hands. Oh my God. He put her down in front of the sink. I didn't lie to you, did I? Cameron was so embarrassed that she could not raise her head. Have I been walking around with this face throughout the whole day? No wonder the delivery driver stared at me strangely when I went out to retrieve our takeout. A towel dropped down from above and covered her head. When she lifted it, Waylon had already walked outside the door. Take some time to clean yourself. After Waylon left the bathroom, Cameron closed the bathroom door hurriedly. There goes my image. After taking a shower, Cameron realized she had not brought her pajamas. Thus, she wrapped herself in a bath towel, stuck half of her head out of the bathroom, and shouted, Wayne. Waylon entered his bedroom. What's wrong? She replied embarrassingly, I didn't bring my pajamas into the bathroom. Surprisingly, Waylon had already prepared a lady's nightgown for her. Something felt a little indescribably familiar to her as soon as she put on the nightgown. Wait a minute. Doesn't this nightgown have the same style as the one that he's wearing? Is this a pair of couple nightgowns? Cameron walked out of the bathroom and saw Waylon leaning on the head of the bed with his eyes closed, resting. The sunlight of the dusk shone on the window and softened the tough edges of his well-defined facial features. She called out, Wayne? She was a little startled when he did not respond to her. Is he asleep? Cameron approached him, leaned over, raised her hand, and waved it in front of his eyes. He did not react to her actions. His gentle and steady breathing continued, and his broad chest undulated. Cameron stared at him. Although she had long noticed that he was breathtakingly handsome, he was not only good-looking, but also in good shape. She took a closer look at his body, from head to toe. She only dared to do so when he was soundly asleep. Waylon suddenly opened his eyes and saw Cameron staring straight at him. He then raised his hand and took her into his arms. She was caught off guard and threw herself on his body. Weren't you asleep? He let off a hoarse chuckle. I only wanted to see what you'd do to me. At that moment, Waylon's cell phone rang abruptly. He got up and sullenly picked up the call. The caller ID showed that it was a call from his mother. He looked back at Cameron, who had buried herself under the blanket, and answered the call. Mom? Waylon, what's with the news? Waylon frowned. What news are you talking about? After Maisie said something to him, Waylon hung up the phone and quickly opened a news app on his phone. It appeared that paparazzi had photographed him and Minzy entering and leaving the hotel, and it turned into gossip. And the media was speculating that Minzy was the future in-law of the Goldmans. It seems that because I accompanied Daisy to the variety show, I'd become the target of the paparazzi. He put the phone down, walked up to the bed, and pulled up the blanket. Cameron instantly grabbed it. Waylon leaned over and kissed her on the forehead. I'm heading out. Stay home and wait for me. After saying that, he grabbed his shirt, put it on, and left the room. Chapter 2383. Cameron sat up and turned on her cell phone when the door closed. While Waylon had been talking on the phone earlier, she had taken out her phone and seen the news while hiding under the blanket. Minzy Holland is the future eldest daughter-in-law of the Goldmans? Cameron tooted. I'm really sorry, but I've reserved the title. At 7 p.m., at the Glitz Club. Waylon was sitting in a private room. There was no one else in the private room except his bodyguards. Soon after that, Malin appeared and walked toward Waylon with a smile. Mr. Goldman, are you looking for me? Waylon asked Malin to take a seat and motioned to one of the bodyguards to pour him some wine. Under the dimmed light from the lamp in the room, No one could distinguish the expression on Wayland's face, whether he was joyous or infuriated. He then crossed his legs and leaned back in the chair. "Mr. Holland, you're one of the business partners of the Dominic Group. I asked to meet you here for a reason, and only one reason. I hope you can come forward and clarify the scandal between Miss Holland and me." Malon's hand, which was picking the wine glass up, froze in mid-air as he raised his head. "A scandal? What do you mean by that, Mr. Goldman?" Seeing that Malon really did not know about the news, Wayland placed his phone in front of him. Malon picked it up, took a glance at the content, and was instantly stunned. Wayland continued indifferently. "Allow me to clarify the situation. I'm not in an intimate relationship with Miss Holland, and I'm already married. Miss Holland invited me to the hotel only for a meal, and what we talked about was strictly business-related." Malon understood what he meant, but was surprised by the fact that Wayland was already married. "But are you married?" "I've already obtained my marriage certificate, but my wife doesn't want me to disclose our relationship to the public, so you're the first person to know about this apart from my relatives." Everything became clear to Malon. "I see." But he thought of something and asked, "Then why didn't you release a statement and clarify the situation yourself? As soon as Mr. Goldman makes his marriage public, he'll be able to clear up this scandal without having to ask me for help. I only found out that Minzy is acquainted with the eldest heir of the Goldmans when he showed me the news. Speaking of which, that girl actually kept that from me." Wayland tapped his fingertips against the table. "If I were to be the party clarifying things at this moment, my marriage would naturally be made public. At that time, Miss Holland would also be dragged into this turmoil. I believe you don't want to see your daughter getting a bad rap out of this incident. Am I right, Mr. Holland?" Wayland's words enlightened Malon in an instant. Of course, Mr. Goldman is officially married. The scandal published by the media will be regarded as the truth in the eyes of the public. So, as soon as Mr. Goldman announces his marriage, Minzy will surely be deemed a homewrecker and be prone to public criticism. Malon nodded, and his expression looked distressed. "I'm sorry. I wasn't aware of that outcome. Please rest assured, I'll clarify this matter to the media." Wayland smiled. "Thank you." After Malon left the private room, Wayland frowned slightly. The paparazzi have no reason to follow Minzy around the city. I attended a variety show and gained a certain level of popularity, so it's only natural for the paparazzi not to miss the opportunity to come up with a story or two about me. I've given Mr. Holland the chance to take the initiative to clarify the matter to the media and public. That is me showing the Hollands and Minzy some respect. After all, my marriage with Cameron is still a secret from the public, and Minzy really doesn't have to be implicated. Public opinion can crush a person's reputation in the blink of an eye. Minzy and I aren't close. I don't even consider us friends. So, there's no need for me to sacrifice a woman's reputation in order to protect mine. Besides, I do feel a little sorry for her. I did use her to test Cameron, and I clearly knew how she felt about me. As such, having Mr. Holland come forward to clarify this matter would bring about the best outcome for both parties. Furthermore, even if I want to make things public, it has to be done by the woman back at home, willingly and voluntarily. Wayland returned to Emperon Villa at 9 p.m. The light in the room was still on. He pushed open the door and realized that Cameron had already fallen asleep. Wayland walked to the edge of the bed, sat down, leaned over, and kissed her forehead, the tip of her nose, and her lips. Chapter 2384. Stop it, Cameron pushed him away. She was so sleepy that she could not even open her eyes, and everything happening around her was blurred out to her. Wayland's Adam's apple twitched, and he loosened his collar. Look at you, sleeping as soundly as a baby does. He rolled onto the bed, took her into his arms, and stroked her cheek with his palm. When will you make our relationship known to the public? On the other side of the city, in the hotel. Minzy was sitting on the couch, going through the news article. She had long known that the media would publish the news. Reading how the reporters and editors brought the relationship between her and Wayland to life, she pursed her lips tightly. She was afraid that Waylon would release a statement to clarify their relationship, but she also hoped he would not. With this news, can I consider myself somehow related to him now? The doorbell rang all of a sudden. Minzy got up and walked up to the door to open it. She was surprised when she saw the man standing at the door. Dad? Malin walked into the room with a sullen expression. Minzy asked, Dad, why are you here? Malin sat on the couch. Why didn't you tell me that you know the eldest heir of the Goldmans? She was dumbfounded and naturally thought that her father had seen the news. She lowered her gaze and explained with a smile, You didn't ask me about him, did you? Actually, Mr. Goldman and I have known each other since I met him on the East Islands. Malin rubbed the bridge of his nose. How could you be this careless to make it into such a scandal? You're to come with me tomorrow and clarify your relationship with him in front of the media. After listening to her father's order, Minzy's expression froze. Me? Clarify? Otherwise, what else do you plan to do? Malin knew that Waylon had already gotten married but had chosen not to disclose his marriage. Thus, he, an outsider, must not go around spreading the truth. Do you know that this scandal will cause you a lot of trouble? I've contacted the media, and you'll come with me tomorrow to clarify this matter in front of the public. She responded anxiously in an instant, Why do we need to clarify? Mr. Goldman didn't even step forward and clarify the. Before she could finish speaking, Malin stared at her in astonishment. Minzy, what are you talking about? Malin was a little surprised that such a thing would escape his daughter's mouth, and he even had a bad premonition. Please don't tell me that you've. Dad, I like him. I like Mr. Goldman. Minzy admitted her feelings for Waylon. The Hollands aren't doing so badly in the Kong ports. Even if our family isn't as prolific and prestigious as the Goldmans, we should still be able to match them in status, right? She originally thought that her father would support her after getting to know how she felt, but what she did not expect was Malin's gloomy expression. No way. She was startled. But why? You don't have to know the reason, Malin replied decisively, adding, You two are not compatible, Minzy. That man has already gotten married. He is no longer single and available, so I'll never just sit aside and watch my daughter make such a dumb decision. Minzy asked in disbelief, Dad, you once mentioned that if I were to encounter a man that I wish to get married. Malin raised his voice. That also depends on whether the other party likes you or not. She burst into tears. I know. But I like him. Do you remember what I taught you since you were still a little girl? Women should never belittle themselves, so what if you love him with every fiber of your being? Has he taken a fancy to you? Minzy opened her mouth, but was at a loss for words. Her father's words made her feel embarrassed about herself. Does falling for someone that doesn't like me in return mean belittling myself? I like Wayne, and I'm not doing anything wrong because of that, right? Malin took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Okay, just come with me to the press conference to that level in life. Chapter 2385. Malin left the room after saying what he had to say. The next day, early in the morning, a shimmer of light pierced through the curtains and shone on the head of the bed. Cameron turned over, hugged someone beside her, and suddenly opened her eyes. Waylon lay beside her on his side, propping his hand against the side of his forehead as if he had been awake for a long time. He fiddled with the ends of her hair and kissed it. You've woken up? Cameron closed her eyes. No, I haven't. He smirked, turned over, and covered her with his body in an instant. Cameron opened her eyes immediately and pressed her hands against his chest. Wayne Goldman. His kiss stopped at the corner of her lips. What's up? I want to eat the attic's short ribs. The last time they ordered takeout from that place, she got to try the short ribs once, and she really liked them. Waylon chuckled, knowing that she was changing the subject. All right, I'll go and buy them. He was about to get up, but Cameron pulled him back to stop him. Take me there to eat. Waylon was slightly startled, and his gaze looked earnest. Are you sure? She frowned. What's wrong with that? Can't you bring me out? Am I a disgrace to you? Is it embarrassing for you to bring me out? Waylon burst into laughter abruptly, and his lips landed on her forehead as he gave her a peck. Get out of bed then. I'll take you there. Because of the drizzle from last night, the sky was still gray and misty, cold and damp breezes were brushing through the branches in the courtyard, and all the plants along the way were covered with dew. A black Bentley pulled over at the entrance of the attic. Waylon got out of the car first, walked around the car, and opened the front passenger seat door. Cameron stepped out of the car and crossed her arms together because of the freezing ambient temperature. She had gotten used to staying in the East Islands, where winter was nowhere to be found, so this temperature was a little too unbearable for her. Waylon wrapped a scarf around her neck. Is it cold? Cameron's eyelashes twitched. What do you think? I won't even be able to move around nimbly if a fight breaks out now. She took the initiative to insert her hand into his coat pocket. Okay, please don't hold me. I'll walk by myself. He smiled helplessly and led her into the attic. How could the waiters and waitresses working in the attic not know about Waylon? Apart from that, Waylon's scandal was now the talk of the city. As such, everyone was surprised when they saw him appearing in public with Cameron. That woman is obviously not the woman that was mentioned in the scandal. Could it be that the eldest heir of the Goldman has changed his partner again? Mr. Goldman. The manager of the attic came over with a grin on his face and a very enthusiastic attitude. You've come. Do you want a private room? However, before Waylon could speak, Cameron had already responded to the manager's question. We'll sit in the main hall. The manager was flustered. They want to eat in the hall. But no one from the Goldmans has ever sat in the hall in the past. Waylon nodded. Then we'll sit in the hall. His attitude toward Cameron surprised the manager. At that moment, he saw Cameron's hand sitting in Waylon's pocket. Oh my, their relationship isn't as simple as it seems. This lady must be the real deal, right? Waylon dragged the chair out for Cameron, and she sat down and started ordering food immediately. Waylon poured them some tea. I didn't expect that she would like the short ribs from this place so much. It seems that I'll have to learn how to cook this dish in the future. When all the dishes were served, Waylon started fetching all the dishes when Cameron suddenly looked at him and said, "Feed me." He lifted his gaze. He had actually noticed Cameron's thoughts. Obviously, she was concerned about the scandal between him and Minzy. Waylon did not expose her thoughts. Instead, he picked up a piece of short ribs and placed it on her plate. She frowned. I asked you to feed me. He pretended to look a little embarrassed. It's not very appropriate for me to do that in public. Cameron restrained her expression immediately and said cynically, Oh really? Then why didn't you care about the public's opinion when you went out and ate with another woman? Yet, you care about it now that you're eating with me? The hilarity in his eyes could no longer be concealed. How can this be the same? How is this different? Oh, you're actually afraid of making it into scandals, but you seem quite happy about your scandal with Minzy. Cameron picked up her silverware and picked up the rib, but the wrath within her was burning so ferociously that she had lost her appetite. Chapter 2386. Seeing that Cameron was so jealous, Waylon laughed out loud. Who's the one who told me that we won't be making our relationship public? How do you plan to explain this to the media and public if we are caught and photographed by paparazzi? Cameron choked on her own words. She suddenly remembered that she had said something about not wanting to make things between them public before this. Waylon raised his eyebrows slightly. Is that all you have to say? She was a little embarrassed. I'm indeed the one who said that I didn't want to be made public back then, but I'm also the one who's demanding to make things public now. Did I just smack myself in the face? You're going back on your own words now, and I'm confused about what I should believe and ignore. Waylon propped his hand against the side of his forehead and gave off a clearly satisfied expression accompanied by traces of innocence. If our marriage were to be made public, you might start to regret marrying me and ask me for a divorce. Then I'll be turned into a man who gets abandoned by his wife, And the people of Basburg will surely use this farce to ridicule me in the future. His reasons were all logically and properly arranged, and it sounded as if he was worried that he would turn into a poor man who could be abandoned any time. Cameron took a deep breath. Why would you think so? Waylon let off a faint sigh. It's surely because I'm still not good enough for you to come to a decision to announce our relationship to the public. Otherwise, I wouldn't be banned from letting the world know about our marriage, and now that I've been found in a scandal with another woman, I'm being questioned whether I'm having an F. Cameron got up and covered his mouth. That's enough acting for a day. Waylon grabbed the back of her hand and stared straight at her. Then can I make it public now? Cameron gnashed her teeth and whispered, yes. I can't hear you. I said yes, she shouted out loud, causing everyone sitting around her to stare in her direction. Cameron smiled apologetically at those people, sat back in her seat, and glared at the man that was giving off a profound smirk across from her. This fella is really as cunning as an old fox. On the other side of the city, Malin had already gathered a hall full of reporters and was about to release a statement to clarify his daughter's scandal. He looked down at his watch, and Minzy was still nowhere to be seen at this time. His secretary hurried toward him. Mr. Holland, we couldn't find Miss Holland in the hotel. Malin frowned, and his expression stiffened as a solemn thought crossed his mind. I knew it. But I can't let her be any longer. The reporters who came asked him about his daughter's relationship with Waylon, if the two families were about to hold a wedding ceremony for them, and if Minzy and Waylon were dating. Malin's expression was so gloomy and terrifying that he would be able to make it into the cast of a horror movie without an audition. His masseter twitched at that moment. That's why I'm holding this press conference today, to clarify my daughter's affairs with Mr. Goldman. A clarification? One of the reporters in the audience sounded surprised. Malin added with a dimmed expression, yes, it's a clarification. My daughter doesn't have a relationship with Mr. Goldman. They're only ordinary friends who went to the hotel's restaurant for a meal. I don't know why the media are writing these things about them. Must my daughter have a relationship with all the men she's eaten with in the past? A female reporter asked, Mr. Holland, wouldn't it be beneficial for your daughter to be in a relationship with the eldest heir of the Goldmans? However, judging from how you're reacting to this news, it seems that you're not really happy with the scandal that Miss Holland is in. Malin's gaze looked stern and sharp. The Goldmans aren't the only family who have a son, are they? All the media in Basburg might have their eyes set on the Goldmans, but does that mean that the Hollands must hop onto this train too? I don't possess such lofty ideals and am content with what I currently have. I only hope that my daughter can find a man that suits her. Therefore, I'm sincerely asking everyone present not to tie my daughter to Mr. Goldman again. Malin then bowed to the reporters and left with his secretary. This clarification statement made the news almost immediately, and Malin's words received a lot of support on the internet. Hashtag, he knows his position very well. That's why he's one of the best fathers in the history of Basburg. Hashtag. Hashtag as a businessman, it's rare for someone to have such thoughts. Too many parents would turn the marriage of their children into just another business transaction. That's why this incident is showing everyone in Basburg that Mr. Holland is a very rational father. Hashtag. Chapter 2387. Hashtag, am I the only one who thinks that this old man is trying his best to help his daughter cut ties with the eldest heir of the Goldmans? Could it be that he's a very promiscuous man? Hashtag. Hashtag, oh my, now that you mentioned it, when Mr. Goldman attended the variety show with Daisy, the way he looked at and interacted with Miss Southern seemed rather flirtatious, but he's now having a private meal with another woman. Speaking of which, the second heir of the Goldmans and Daisy have both settled down, and the eldest brother is the only one left. It's hard not to let my imagination run wild. Hashtag. Hashtag Mr. Goldman is giving me a playboy vibe now. He seems to treat all women too well. Hashtag. At Black Gold. Waylon closed the lid of his laptop after watching the news regarding Malin's clarification. As for the gossip on the internet, he straight up ignored all of them. Leonardo knocked on the door at that moment. He lifted his gaze. Come in. Leonardo pushed the door into the office and asked, "Mr. Goldman, Miss Holland has come to see you again. Do you want to meet her?" Wayland squinted and responded after a while, "Just tell her that I'm not here." Just as Leonardo was about to go out, Wayland stopped him. "Wait." He turned around. "Is there anything else that requires my assistance? The rumors that have been spreading around within the company, just do something about them." "Thank you." Although Wayland did not explain much, Leonardo already understood what he was trying to say and nodded. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." Minzy was waiting in the lobby, carrying a lunchbox she had made by herself. Although her father had clarified the scandal between her and Wayland, it was not a reason for her to give up. Leonardo walked toward her and greeted her, "Miss Holland." Minzy asked with a smile, "Mr. Goldman is in, right?" Leonardo replied with a polite smile, "I'm sorry, Mr. Goldman isn't in. But you can always leave him a message. I'll convey it on your behalf as soon as he comes back." Minzy was slightly startled. "But the lady at the front desk told me that he's in today." Leonardo turned and glared at the receptionist. The female receptionist hurriedly lowered her head, looking inexplicably guilty. "Could it be that I've been wrong all along?" Leonardo sighed. "It's no wonder Mr. Goldman would ask me to deal with the rumors spreading around the company. If it were to go on like this, things would turn out the same as what happened to the president before this. Miss Holland, you should understand that the scandal between you and Mr. Goldman has been clarified. So if there's nothing urgent or important in the future, try not to come to Black Gold as frequently as you're doing now." Minzy's expression froze. Did Wayne choose not to come down and meet me on purpose? Is it because of the scandal? The receptionist's facial expressions became increasingly embarrassed, especially since they had always regarded Minzy as Wayland's future wife. "It turns out that our boss doesn't even plan to recognize her. However, Miss Holland has never corrected and clarified her relationship with Mr. Goldman. Anyone who understood the current situation knew that Minzy wanted to keep the scandal brewing. As long as Wayland did not come forward to explain himself or clarify the situation, she would be able to continue her non-existent relationship with him, and Leonardo's words made Minzy feel extremely defeated. Minzy bit her lip. "I see." She turned around in despair and clenched the lunchbox in her hand. "I deliberately didn't stop the paparazzi the other day only because I wanted to see Wayne's attitude toward me. If he chose to remain silent and not clarify the scandal to the media, I would be able to selfishly tie myself to him, approach him, and make it known to everyone in Bassburg that I'm his woman. As for Cameron, she'd definitely know her position and leave Wayne after seeing the scandal. Wayne obviously hasn't said anything about our scandal, but my dad still chose to voice out and clarify the situation on my behalf. She could not help but blame her father at the moment." Walking out of the Black Gold Tower, Minzy ran into Cameron, who was getting out of the car, and Cameron saw her too. Minzy seemed to be dazzled by jealousy. She pursed her lips and walked toward Cameron. "Miss Southern, are you here to see Mr. Goldman?" Cameron's gaze landed on the lunchbox in Minzy's hand, and she squinted. "And you're here to deliver lunch?" Chapter 2388. Pfft. "Wayne Goldman, what a blessed bastard you are. A pretty lady is down here fighting for a chance just to deliver a meal into your hands." A faint smile escaped through the corners of Minzy's lips. "Yes, but Mr. Goldman isn't in, so even if you've come all the way here, I'm afraid there's nothing you can do about his absence." "He's not here at the company?" Cameron looked slightly bewildered. "Why would I lie to you? He's really not in." Cameron did not even wait for her to finish the sentence. She took out her cell phone, dialed his number, and asked, "Where are you?" Minzy's expression stiffened slightly. Cameron then hung up the phone. "He just told me that he's in the office." "Miss Holland, lying is not a good habit that you should have." Minzy's expression looked even more embarrassed. She did not expect Cameron to call Wayland directly in order to confirm his location. That was a direct smack in her face. "Wayne deliberately didn't want to see me, but he's more than willing to meet Cameron." "Are they really dating?" Seeing that Cameron was about to get into the building, Minzy suddenly grabbed her. Cameron, can we talk? Cameron frowned but did not reject her. Cameron and Minzy walked to the parking lot, where Minzy turned around and asked, "You're dating Mr. Goldman, right?" Cameron crossed her arms. "Didn't you know that? But didn't you tell me that you were not into him when I was on the East Islands?" When Minzy was on the East Islands, she did not see any clue that showed that Cameron had fallen for Waylon. Cameron had even wanted to make a match out of Waylon and Minzy. Thinking of this, Minzy held Cameron's hand. "Didn't you want to pair me off with him back then?" "Cameron, I really like him. I've been in love with him since I met him in the East Islands. Please help me. Can you give him up for me?" Cameron was astonished. "Back on the East Islands, before I realized I had a thing for Wayne, I wanted to bring Minzy and Wayne together. However, Wayne rejected her, and I knew that. So what is she trying to say now? Does she actually want me to give up Wayne?" Cameron was silent for a long time, before she broke her hand out of Minzy's grasp. "Miss Holland, do you take Wayne an item? You can always own him when you want him, and I'll be able to let go of him as long as I want to." Minzy shook her head. "That's not what." Cameron continued. "Yes, I was trying to set you up with him initially, but he made it clear that he's not into you. If he doesn't like you, what's the use of you trying to force things? He'll fall for me eventually." Minzy sounded hysterical. "As long as you give me a little more time, I'll make it happen. I'll make him realize that I'm the woman who suits him the best." Cameron frowned, feeling that she had been cursed. She then sneered. "Do you mean that I don't suit him well?" Minzy did not speak. Cameron looked directly into her eyes without a hint of diffidence. "Minzy, I just realized that you're actually such a person. I really thought you were a knowledgeable and understanding woman before this. I didn't expect you to be quite self-righteous at times." Minzy's expression dimmed. "What did you just say?" Cameron pinched her chin and approached her. "I said you're quite self-righteous." Minzy's expression totally changed. She had always maintained a ladylike manner in front of the public, but she could no longer achieve that now. "What right do you have to say that I'm self-righteous? Cameron Southern, aren't you, hypocritical woman yourself? When I was in the East Islands, it was clear that you wanted to match me with Mr. Goldman, but since you already had a thing for Mr. Goldman at that time, why did you come to me and make a fool out of me?" She thought it was all Cameron's fault. She should not have believed that Cameron would match her up with Waylon in the first place, because she was the one who got screwed around in the end. Cameron only felt speechless and laughed out of anger. "Minzy, if it wasn't Uncle Damien's sake, I wouldn't even be bothered enough to talk to you now. You're now blaming me instead, just because you've been rejected?" Chapter 2389. Everyone has a fair chance to compete. I presented you with the chance back then, but whether he would choose to be with you was never in my control. And you're saying I was making a fool out of you? But think carefully, am I the person who told him not to choose you? You. What will you get from arguing with me about these details now? If you think you still have a fighting chance, just go to Wayne and ask him for an explanation instead of harassing me. You should know that I grew up in the East Islands, and I've already gotten very used to being rude and vulgar. So if anything were to go wrong, I'd certainly make a move. You being a man or a woman makes no difference to me." After saying that, Cameron left her alone and left the scene. Minzy clenched her hands that were resting on her sides. How can she expect me to feel reconciled about my loss? Cameron was extremely angry as Minzy had inexplicably targeted her because of Waylon. That bastard only knows how to attract other women's attention. It's obvious he sucks when it comes to cleaning up his own shit, and he just has to get me implicated in his shit show. She was about to enter the elevator when someone suddenly stopped her. "Wait a minute." The female employee gave off an awkward but polite smile. "I'm sorry, but this elevator is reserved for the president of this company. Are you new here?" Cameron was caught off guard by what she had just heard. "You people actually classify your elevators? This is the company's rule. None of our staff can use this elevator. Are you new here? Which department do you work in?" I haven't seen you before. The female employee took a closer look at her and did not remember seeing her in the company before this. Cameron shrugged. I'm not an employee of the company. The employee immediately stopped her out of professionalism. Then that's one more reason I can't allow you to go up. Are you here looking for someone? Just let me know which department the person works in, and I'll help you make a call to inform that person about your arrival. I'm looking for Wayne. Who? Who's that? The female employee was astounded. Cameron repeated herself, the eldest heir of the Goldmans, Wayne Goldman. The female staff looked even more embarrassed now. Miss Holland had just come looking for Mr. Goldman, but he refused to meet her. And another woman is now here asking to see Mr. Goldman? Do you have an appointment? Cameron started to get a little impatient. Why would I need an appointment to meet him? This is the rule. Your company's rules are made for you, the employees, not for me. It didn't say that I, an outsider, have to abide by your company's rules, right? After saying that, Cameron patted her on the shoulder and chuckled. Don't worry, sis. I told him that I had arrived before I came in. You won't be blamed. After that, Cameron turned around and was about to enter the elevator. The female employee quickly pulled her out. You can't just go up without an appointment. If you really know Mr. Goldman in person, you can only contact him yourself. She genuinely did not want to get herself involved in another incident like what happened with Minzy just minutes ago, lest getting herself fired. Seeing that the other party looked very nervous, Cameron understood that she seemed really afraid of being blamed. Thus, she took a deep breath, took out her cell phone, and sent a voice message to Waylon. Wayne Goldman, I'm downstairs now. Come down and bring me up. The female employee inhaled sharply and froze on the spot. And the other female employees heard the sound and looked over. What did I just hear? Wayne Goldman? Did I just mishear that? We just sent Miss Holland off, and here comes another one. Cameron waited in the lobby, and it did not take long for the elevator, dedicated to the high management, to start descending. The female employees were dumbfounded. Could it be that she really knows Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman didn't even meet Miss Holland today. In the past, when Miss Holland came to the company, Leonardo was always the one who came down here to bring her up. But Mr. Goldman is actually coming downstairs to pick this woman up, personally. The elevator door opened at that moment, and as expected, Waylon was standing inside. The employee returned to her senses and quickly nodded. Mr. Goldman, I'm sorry, I didn't know this lady is your acquaintance. Before she could finish the sentence, Waylon had already walked out of the elevator without a trace of wrath in his eyes. You can go back to what you were doing before this. Chapter 2390. The receptionist left the scene in a hurry, hoping that she had not made any major mistake today. Waylon lowered his gaze, glanced at Cameron, who looked infuriated, and could not help but laugh out loud. What's the matter? You got so angry just because someone stopped you in the lobby? Cameron crossed her arms. This has nothing to do with being stopped or not. He narrowed his eyes as if he had seen through her thoughts. Did you run into Minzy? What do you think? I thought so. Waylon smiled. What did she tell you? Cameron turned her face away. She told me a lot of stuff. Waylon raised his arm and wrapped it around her shoulder. He did not even care if there was anyone in the lobby and led her into the elevator. When the elevator arrived at the administrative department, the department's employees were utterly dumbfounded when they saw Waylon coming out of the elevator with a woman in his arms. Some of them even managed to recognize Cameron. Isn't that the female guest who recorded the variety show with Miss Vanderbilt and Mr. Goldman? Stepping into the office, Waylon pulled down the blinds, instantly picked up Cameron, placed her on the desk, and wrapped his arms around her waist. Are you still angry? He then pressed his warm lips against her forehead, and his breath brushed through her fluffy fringe. Cameron lowered her gaze and refused to look straight at him. All you know is to leave all the mess you created to me. Waylon fiddled with the ends of her hair with his fingers and smirked. What's the mess that you're referring to? Stop asking me questions that you already know the answer to. Cameron raised her head and met his gaze. Miss Holland likes you so much that she actually begged me to give up on you to fulfill her wish. Waylon pursed his lips tightly and said nothing. Obviously, he wanted to know Cameron's response to that request too. Cameron snorted lightly and continued complaining. Your charm is truly amazing, Mr. Goldman. What's more, you didn't resolve the mess you brought back from outside and even implicated me. And now I have to act like a bitch and chase those women away from you for you. Upon hearing her jealous tone, a hint of hilarity overflowed from Waylon's eye socket as he was only a few inches away from her. Yeah, it's indeed my fault. She turned her head away. I'm glad to know that you're aware of that. He responded with a faint hum. I've made you jealous for a few days already, and I still can't coax you. Cameron stopped talking. I've asked Malin Holland to publicly clarify my scandal with Minzy, and I've been trying to avoid her as much as possible. Waylon pinched her slender fingers. I have nothing to do with her and vice versa, so we don't need to bother ourselves with this news. What's more, when we make our marriage public, this rumor will disappear without us having to do anything, right? He had never responded to the scandal directly because his mind was never on the scandal. He had handed the initiative over to Malin and considered that a tiny gesture to show the Hollands some respect. Even if Malin chose not to release a statement to clarify the scandal would still be deemed harmless as soon as their marriage was made public. It was just that his young wife was very jealous because of the incident, so it was necessary for him to coax her. Cameron pursed her lips. The public will think you're interested in her too if you continue ignoring the scandal. Waylon raised his eyebrows. So does this mean that you care about it? Cameron choked on her words, and she was at a loss. Waylon chuckled and rubbed his palm against her cheek. Everything's fine. Knowing that you care is more than enough for me. I'll pay more attention to such incidents in the future. Cameron smacked his hand away, feeling inexplicably frustrated and defeated. She had never failed like this in the 20-plus years since she was born, and she had been defeated by charm and appearance. You must have cast some spell on me. His smirk intensified, and his lips landed on hers. Yes, it's a love spell, and I'm the only one who can undo it. Not long after Malin's clarification hit the internet, the public's comments and opinions faded. Just as everyone thought things were settling down, a post from a netizen known as Oracle on Twitter led to many heated discussions on the platform. The post claimed that Minzy had gotten acquainted with Waylon when they were both staying in the East Islands, and it was love at first sight. It also added that a woman known as Miss Southern tried to make a match out of Minzy and Waylon. However, Cameron used dirty tactics behind the scenes to ruin this relationship in the making.